The United States wanted to burn Japan to the ground using bats. Not a meme, not a joke, an actual classified military project. And here's the insane part. It worked. Just not the way they planned. Stick around, because this story involves an accidental self-inflicted military disaster. A dentist who somehow got into the weapons business, and a weapon so effective that it terrified the people who built it. Now, when you think of weapons development, you probably picture scientists in lab coats, military generals, maybe some guy named Klaus with 12 PhDs. You do not picture a dentist. But that's exactly who pitched this idea to the Pentagon. A dentist named Lytle Adams. And no, he wasn't even a military dentist, just a regular guy who pulled teeth for a living. So how does a dentist end up in a room with top military brass, pitching a bat-based incendiary weapon? Well, that story starts on December 7th, 1941, a date that, as they say, will live in infamy. Pearl Harbor had just been attacked. America was furious, shocked, and suddenly at war with Japan. But there was a problem. Japan was really far away. Like really, really far. We're talking thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean. Bombing runs were expensive, dangerous, and, honestly, not that effective yet. See, American bombers in 1942 were good, but precision? That wasn't really their thing. You'd send a plane halfway across the world, drop your payload, and maybe hit what you were aiming at. Maybe. And here's where Japan's geography became both a strength and a massive vulnerability. Japanese cities weren't built like American or European cities. No concrete and steel skyscrapers. No brick apartment blocks. They were made of wood, bamboo, paper screens, tatami mats. Basically, every single city was a giant tinderbox just waiting for a match. The problem? How do you start that fire without losing half your bomber fleet in the process? Conventional firebombs were one option, but they required huge numbers of planes, tons of fuel, and you'd still lose pilots to anti-aircraft fire. The U.S. military was desperate for a solution. Something cheap, something unexpected, something that could slip past defenses and ignite chaos from within. And that's when our dentist friend walked into the room with an idea so ridiculous, so absurd, that the generals literally laughed at first. But then they stopped laughing, and they started listening. So let's rewind a bit. Who was Lytle Adams? He was a dentist from Pennsylvania, but he was also kind of an inventor. The quirky type, the guy who'd tinker with stuff in his garage and come up with random solutions to problems nobody asked him to solve. And right after Pearl Harbor, he was driving through the Southwest, New Mexico, I think, when he visited some caves. Carlsbad Caverns, to be specific. Now, if you've never been, Carlsbad Caverns is home to one of the largest bat colonies in North America. We're talking millions of bats. They pour out of the caves at sunset like a living black river. Adams stood there, watching this spectacle, and his brain made a connection that can only be described as completely unhinged. He thought, what if we could weaponize bats? And I know what you're thinking. Weaponize bats? Well, like train them to dive bomb people. No, worse. Adams wanted to strap tiny incendiary bombs to bats, fly them over Japan, and let them loose. Think about it from his perspective. Bats are nocturnal. They fly at night when defenses are weaker. They're small and nearly impossible to detect. They naturally seek out dark, enclosed spaces to roost during the day, like attics, eaves, warehouses, and wooden buildings. There are millions of them. You could deploy thousands in a single mission. And best of all, they're free. You just catch them. So Adams sat down and wrote a letter to the White House. And somehow, this letter made its way to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's desk. FDR read it, and instead of throwing it in the trash like a sane person, he passed it along to the military with a note that basically said, "This man is onto something. Look into it." I like to imagine the general who got that memo just staring at it in disbelief. "Sir, are we really considering bat bombs?" Apparently, yes. Bats. But here's the thing. Once the military actually ran the numbers, they realized Adams wasn't crazy. Or at least, his idea wasn't. Because when Adams finished his pitch to the top brass, he said something that made everyone in the room go silent. He said, Gentlemen, we can burn an entire city from the inside out, and they'll never see it coming. All right, so they're actually going to do this. The U.S. military is building bat bombs. Let's talk about how this thing was designed, because it's equal parts genius and absolute madness. First, the container. Imagine a massive bomb canister. But instead of explosives, it's divided into compartments, like a honeycomb. Each compartment holds one bat. And we're not talking about a few dozen bats. One canister could hold over 1,000 bats, each one in its own little cell, kept in a state of forced hibernation by cooling the whole thing down. Why hibernation? Because you can't exactly have 1,000 angry bats flapping around inside a bomb casing. They'd freak out, hurt themselves, and ruin the whole mission. So the bats are basically put to sleep, chilled down until they go dormant. Now, each bat has a tiny incendiary device attached to it. We're talking 15 to 20 grams, less than an ounce. It's a small capsule filled with napalm. Yes, that napalm, with a timer fuse. The plan was this. A bomber flies over a Japanese city at dawn. The canister is released and begins falling. At a certain altitude, the canister opens like a flower, deploying a parachute to slow its descent. As it opens, the bats wake up from hibernation because of the warmer air temperature. The bats, now awake and confused, do what bats do. They scatter and look for places to roost. They fly into attics, warehouses, barns, temples, anywhere dark and enclosed. The timers on the incendiary devices tick down. Boom! Or more accurately, whoosh. Thousands of small fires ignite simultaneously across the city. And here's the kicker. These aren't big explosions. They're small, quiet fires. By the time anyone notices, the city is already burning in 100 different places. No way to stop it. No way to coordinate a response. Just chaos. The military love this for one big reason: deniability. If you drop a regular bomb, everyone knows you did it. But if a city mysteriously catches fire in the middle of the night, that could be anything. Accidents, sabotage, bad luck. It was psychological warfare with wings. But, and this is a big but, there was one tiny problem they didn't anticipate during testing. So they've got the design. They've got the bats. Now it's time to test this thing. The military set up a test site at an airfield in New Mexico. They built some fake structures to simulate Japanese buildings, with frames, paper walls, the works. Everything's ready. The team is confident. This is going to be a historic moment in military innovation. They load up the bats. They cool them down. They prep the canister. They release it. The canister opens. The bats wake up. And then, the bats do not fly toward the test buildings. Instead, they scatter in every direction. Some of them, disoriented and annoyed, fly straight into the actual military base. They roost in the hangars, the fuel depots, the barracks, and then the timers go off. Within minutes, the base is on fire. We're talking about a legitimate, uncontrolled blaze. Buildings burning, personnels crumbling, fire trucks rushing in. The U.S. military just accidentally firebombed its own airfield with bats. One witness report described it as the most spectacular unintentional arson in military history. And here's the best part. The base commander, watching his entire facility go up in flames, reportedly turned to the project lead and said, "Well, I guess it works." Because that's the thing, it did work. Way too well. The bats proved that even in an uncontrolled test, they could cause absolute devastation. The fires spread fast, were hard to contain, and started in places no one expected. If this had been an actual Japanese city, it would have been catastrophic. The military was stunned, terrified, and kind of impressed. Project X-Ray wasn't just viable, it was brutally effective. After the accidental self-immolation incident, the military decided to take this seriously. They ran simulations. They crunched numbers. They consulted with fire experts, engineers, and strategists. And the results? Genuinely shocking. According to internal reports, Project X-Ray had the potential to be 10 times more effective than conventional incendiary bombs. Let me break that down. A single B-29 bomber could carry one X-ray canister or about 1,000 bats. Each bat could start one fire. That's 1,000 individual ignition points across a city. Not one big explosion, 1,000 little fires. And because Japanese cities were so densely packed and built with flammable materials, those fires would spread and merge into firestorms. Traditional firebombing required dozens of planes, hundreds of B. And then, the bats do not fly toward the test buildings. Instead, they scatter in every direction. Some of them, disoriented and annoyed, fly straight into the actual military base. They roost in the hangars, the fuel depots, the barracks, and then the timers go off. Within minutes, the base is on fire. We're talking about a legitimate, uncontrolled blaze. Buildings burning, personnels crumbling, fire trucks rushing in. The U.S. military just accidentally firebombed its own airfield with bats. One witness report described it as the most spectacular unintentional arson in military history. And here's the best part. The base commander, watching his entire facility go up in flames, reportedly turned to the project lead and said, "Well, I guess it works." Because that's the thing, it did work. Way too well. The bats proved that even in an uncontrolled test, they could cause absolute devastation. The fires spread fast, were hard to contain, and started in places no one expected. If this had been an actual Japanese city, it would have been catastrophic. The military drew up scenarios. If they deployed X-ray over a city like Osaka, they estimated the city would lose all firefighting capability within 30 minutes. Within an hour, the city would be uncontrollable. By dawn, it would be ash. And the beauty, if you can call it that, was that it required almost no risk to American forces. One plane, one drop, chaos. Everything was pointing toward approval. Funding was increasing. Tests were being refined. Project X-ray was about to become a real weapon of war. But then something happened. Something that made bat bombs look like a children's science project. Something that would change the course of history forever. By mid-1943, Project X-ray was progressing smoothly. The kinks were being worked out. The bats were behaving better. The incendiary devices were more reliable. But there was a problem. Time. See, as effective as the bat bombs were, they still needed more development. More testing. More logistical planning. The estimates said it would take at least another 2 years before X-ray could be deployed at scale. 2 years. And in wartime, 2 years might as well be an eternity. Meanwhile, in a secret facility in Los Alamos, New Mexico, a very different project was underway. The Manhattan Project. You've heard of it. The atomic bomb. The weapon that would end the war and usher in the nuclear age. By 1944, it was clear that the Manhattan Project was going to succeed. And when it did, it would render pretty much every other weapon obsolete. Why spend years perfecting bat bombs when you could just obliterate an entire city in one blinding flash? The math was brutal, but simple. Bat bombs, cheap, effective, but slow to deploy. Atomic bombs, expensive, experimental, but instant. The military made a choice. Resources were redirected. Priorities shifted. Project X-ray was quietly shelved in 1944. No fanfare, no official announcement. Just a memo that said, in essence, thanks for the bats. We're going with nukes instead. Lytle Adams, the dentist who started it all, was reportedly heartbroken. He believed, genuinely believed, that his bat bombs could have won the war with far less destruction and far fewer civilian casualties than atomic weapons. And honestly, he might have been right. But history had other plans. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gate dropped little boy on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man fell on Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war was over, and the world would never be the same. But here's the haunting question. What if things had gone differently? Let's play a game. A thought experiment. What if the atomic bomb had taken longer to develop? What if the Manhattan Project had failed or been delayed by just a year or two? In that alternate timeline, Project X-ray might have been America's primary weapon against Japan. So, what would that have looked like? First, the attacks would have been frequent and widespread. Instead of 2 catastrophic bombings, you'd have dozens, maybe hundreds, of smaller-scale firebombing raids using bats. Cities like Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Nagoya, they'd all be hit, not with one massive explosion, but with wave after wave of silent, creeping fires. The death toll would still be high. Make no mistake, fire is brutal, and Japanese cities were vulnerable. But here's the key difference: no radiation. Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't just destroyed. They were poisoned. The survivors suffered from radiation sickness for decades. Cancer rates spiked, birth defects, long-term contamination. Bat bombs wouldn't have done that. Yes, they burned cities. Yes, people would die. But the land itself wouldn't be uninhabitable. There'd be no fallout, no generational trauma from radiation. And politically, the world would be different. The atomic bomb didn't just end World War II. It started the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, mutuellement assuré de destruction, the existential threat of human extinction. All of that stemmed from the fact that we proved we could split the atom and weaponize it. But if we'd won the war with bat bombs, there'd be no nuclear precedent, no Hiroshima or Nagasaki to haunt the global conscience. Maybe the Soviets never prioritized their own atomic program. Maybe the arms race never happens. Maybe the Cold War is just a regular war. Or maybe it never happens at all. It's impossible to know. But one thing's for sure, the 20th century would have looked very different. And all because of a dentist with a weird idea and a handful of flying mammals. Project X-Ray is one of those stories that sounds too absurd to be true. But it was true. Fully funded, fully tested, nearly deployed. And it's a reminder of something darker about war. War doesn't just bring out the worst in people. It brings out the weirdest. It turns dentists into weapons designers. It turns bats into bombs. It makes the unthinkable seem logical. Because when you're desperate enough, when the stakes are high enough, anything seems reasonable. Lytle Adams wasn't a monster. He was just a guy who wanted to help his country win a war. And in his mind, bat bombs were the humane option. Less destruction than nuclear weapons. More precision than carpet bombing. In a twisted way, he was trying to save lives. But that's the thing about weapons. No matter how clever, how efficient, how humane you make them, they're still designed to kill. Project X-Ray might have been abandoned, but its legacy remains. It's a footnote in history, a bizarre what if, a reminder that the line between genius and madness is razor thin. And somewhere, in a dusty archive, there's a file labeled X-Ray. Inside, there are blueprints, test results, photos of bats in harnesses, and a handwritten note that reads, "The most dangerous weapon in the world weighs 20 grams and sleeps in a dark cell, waiting to wake up." So there you have it. Project X-Ray, the bat bomb, one of the strangest, most terrifying weapons ever conceived. And it almost happened. If you want more deep dives into the weird, classified, and downright bizarre project from World War II, drop a comment below. Should I cover the Nazi sound cannons? The Soviets' anti-tank dog bombs? Yes, really? The British plan to build an aircraft carrier out of IC? Let me know. Your comments help the algorithm push this video to more people. So seriously, comment, like, share. And hey, if you made it this far, you're probably the kind of person who loves this stuff as much as I do. So hit that subscribe button, because trust me, we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. And remember, history is way weirder than fiction. See you in the next one.